Please be seated. David Taylor was supposed to be our MC today. He had some family matters which have taken him out of the area, so you're sort of stuck with me. In any event, we are very pleased today. We do have Jenny Beth Martin from Tea Party Patriots Action, who's going to speak in a little while. I will make this announcement right now. If you happen to be a supporter of President Joe Biden, now would be a good time to leave. You've clearly, your GPS needs to be adjusted, because our next speaker is here to talk on behalf of the not predecessor, but successor to Joe Biden, Donald J. Trump, the next president of the United States. Our speaker has been fighting for freedom for many years. David Purdue began his career, he spent 40 years in business, where he served as the chief executive officer of Reebok. And then, you know all those Dollar Generals that seem to be showing up on every street corner? He was the CEO of that company, so he's responsible for that. He is a native of Georgia who was first elected to the United States Senate in 2014. During his time in the Senate, Senator Purdue was a champion for term limits, reducing spending, and dealing with the nation's debt. And he is here today to talk to us on behalf of President Donald J. Trump. Please welcome Senator David Purdue.
Thanks, Loman.
Senator, welcome.
Thank you, man. Thank you, Loman. Guys, I have great news for you today. I'm not running for anything. I got some more great news for you. Donald J. Trump will be the next president of the United States, and we'll fix this mess. I was so glad to get this call last minute this weekend. I used to live up in Easton, Pennsylvania. I watched what happened here in 2020 and again in 22. We have a lot of work to do here, but I'm optimistic. But there's a reality here that we all need to face up to, and that is that President Donald J. Trump will not be in the White House unless he wins Pennsylvania. That's true about Georgia, too. We have got to get our act together. I'm here to do three things today. One is I want to tell you a little bit about my perspective, because you need to see that to know why I'm here and what I'm trying to get across. I'm not running for anything. What I'm doing right now is doing everything I can around the country to help Donald Trump become the next president. Why? Because we have to save this country. I'll get into that in a minute. The second thing I want to do, I want to tell you what President Trump did when he was in office. We gloss over that, fussing about Biden all the time. We don't really focus on, my goodness, what did we actually accomplish in those 4 years? And what was on tap for the next 4 years? That's the third thing, is I want to talk to you now about what he can do in the second term and what we have to do to realize that second term. Look, the world needs us to get this right. I'm going to talk about that as well, but that's what I'm doing. Let me first give you a little perspective. I had never been in politics. I didn't like it. I didn't like most people who were in politics because it was mostly I didn't like that. And so I wasn't very much involved. Until 2013, I got convicted after President Obama got reelected, primarily because Republicans pouted and did not vote. That's a fact. I got really upset with that. So I ran, got elected as an outsider. I was in the Senate for 6 years, and it was such a humbling experience. The highest honor of my life was to serve in the United States Senate. Not because of it's on my resume. I had a pretty good resume before then. But because when President Trump got elected, I could see then what we could actually get done. But I tell you a little story that kind of epitomizes how Trump got elected. Certainly how I did. I was sort of the original outsider running against the establishment. My first event, what you do when you run, this is 13 now, March of 2013. So for 2 years, I had raised my hand. I'm going to run against 4 people who had been in Congress. There were 3 sitting congressmen and a sitting Secretary of State in our state, a female. And she was really smart. And what I had to do was run against these 4 people who had been in office for 22 years. So we had the first event, a meeting room just exactly like this, a size just about this size. I'm standing in the back. I'm trying to come in the front door. I'm a little bit late. And, I open the door, and this little lady's trying to get in. She's about this tall. She had a cane, and she comes in, and she stops. She looks up at me and said, "I know who you are." I said, "Okay." I knew I was in trouble. She said, "You're running for something, aren't you?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, I'm running for the U.S. Senate." She said, "I just got one question of you. Have you ever done anything in politics? You ever been elected anything?" I said, "No, ma'am." She said, "Well, you got my vote." I didn't have to say a thing, guys. I mean, they worried about what shirt I wore, what words I said, everything else. I had it before I opened the door. Why? Because I'd been talking about how bad Washington was. Well, guess what? Who else did that? Donald Trump. He not only had to run against the Democrats, he had to run against the Republican establishment. He had to administer the government as president against the Republican establishment in many cases. So my position is this, is that he will tell you if he were here, and I'm speaking on his behalf. He knows I'm here. We talk, and what he is so adamant about is that once we get back in, we can know it'll be easy to fix this stuff, but we got to get there. And we can't just assume that because we won in 16 in a straight-up election that we're going to win in 24. But he'll tell you it's a very humbling situation to be president of the United States. I can tell you in a much lower level, it was a very humbling thing to be a United States Senator. And I remember being sworn in the first day I was up there. You stand in the Senate well, everybody sits in their seats. The new members of the Senate come in and you go down to the dais and you are sworn in by the vice president. Yes, the vice president at that time was Joe Biden. But he could make a complete sentence then. So we got sworn, I know. We got sworn in. But I was standing in the back, the doors are open, and the tradition is you walk in with the two senators from your state, the one I was replacing who was retiring, and the other sitting senator. And so we're standing there, and my wife, the tradition is she stands there, she gives you a peck on the cheek, and then you go down and get sworn in and you come out. So she's standing there. My wife and I met in first grade. We've known each other, I get that all the time. We've been married over 50 years, so there aren't many secrets in our household. So, and she's about this tall, and not much gets by my wife. So I'm standing there, and I look over, and I'm nervous, and I'm really nervous, and I feel overwhelmed. And I looked at her, and I said, do you ever, in your wildest dream, imagine that we would be standing here about to go in the floor of the United States Senate, get sworn in? And she said, well, I tell you one thing, you better get over yourself. The second thing is, whoever said you were in my wildest dream? So it's a humbling thing to be here today. I want to thank you for all the work you did in 2020 in January or November, December of 2020 in my state, in my race. And I am so sorry that we didn't pull that off for you. Having won by almost 100,000 votes, we got pulled into a runoff because of our state laws. And people like you from all over the country descended on Georgia because they knew if we lost a majority in the Senate, we would be in real big trouble. So I want to thank you for that. In 2017, when Trump was first elected, he had a meeting in the White House 2 weeks after he was inaugurated. I was in that meeting. It was a leadership meeting of the House and the Senate. I wasn't in the leadership. It was 2 people from the Senate, Republican Senate, and 3 people from the House. And I was also in that meeting. Small meeting, vice president, president, and those 6 people. No staff in the Roosevelt room of the White House. It was historic. The reason I was in that room is because I had been bitching for about 2 years about we got to get the economy going. And I'd gotten in Trump's ear when he became the candidate, and I ran around the country with him as a surrogate, like I'm doing today, telling people why we had to get this man elected. They said, yeah, but have you heard what he says? I mean, my goodness. I said, yeah, but watch what he does. And I'm here today to tell you, stop listening to what he says and watch what he does. So we're in this meeting, and he conducts it like a business guy and an outsider, just like what he was, not a politician. And he laid out the agenda for the first 4 years. We worked on regulation, energy, taxes, and a thing called Dodd-Frank. Remember that? We were killing 4,000 community banks a year. He put in place a program, and we executed it mostly in that year. And what we did is we got the best economic turnaround in U.S. history. 6.5 million people were pulled out of poverty because of Donald Trump's agenda and our execution. That doesn't happen. We became energy independent. My goodness, y'all. This is an amazing issue. We got the economy going. We stood up to China. We stared down Kim Jong-un. He sanctioned Russia. He told Iran, we got us out of the Iran nuclear deal, the insane Iran nuclear deal. And yes, he absolutely moved the embassy, the U.S. embassy, from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. This is what Donald Trump did. Part of this is when he went in there, we had to focus on getting the economy going. But we also had another catastrophe going on. We had millions of people under Obama coming to the United States illegally. You heard about that lately? Over 8 million people coming in illegal. We now know that some of these are nefarious. We know they're on the watch list. In my home state, a young woman, 22-year-old nursing student, was just killed by a Venezuelan illegal. And you know what President Biden did? He called him an illegal during the State of the Union, and the next day he apologized. Oh, I didn't mean to call him illegal. He's undocumented. Well, wait a minute. Undocumented implies that he just has to get to be documented. Well, the problem is that guy should never be in the United States in the first place. So when Trump came in office, we had the lowest economic output in U.S. history. The poverty rate was 16.5%, same as it was in 1965 when the Democrats passed the Great Society Bill, and we spent trillions of dollars over the next 50 years and didn't move poverty at all. Trump comes in, and in 2 years, we pull 6.5 million people out of poverty. That's what can happen when you have Republican ideals put into practice in the real world. That's what Donald Trump brought to the White House and to Washington and the United States. Now, we all know what happened in 2020. I know it better than anybody. I lived it. And what we have to do now is make sure that never happens again. Nobody's going to change the past. Nobody's asking to do that. What we are going to do is make sure it doesn't happen this year. But when we see now what happens when Democrats get in control, Biden has opened the border. He told Iran we'll reinstate the nuclear deal. He pulled back on sanctions in Russia. He stopped ANWR. He shut down ANWR. He shut down the pipeline. Price of oil went from $40 a barrel to $100 a barrel. Now, who benefits from that? Russia, Venezuela, Iran. And what are they doing with that money? The money went into Ukraine fight, for one thing, from Russia, and now it's going to the Houthis, the Hamas, and Hezbollah. That's what has happened under this administration. And he's opened the border. Well, look, guys, we know this is not the America that we all stood up for. I want to thank you for being here. This is so encouraging to me. As I go around the country, I see people just like you standing up and saying, enough, enough. And what we're about to do is this. When Trump gets reelected, we're going to fix that border again. He will fix that border. He will become energy independent again. Again. We'll get the economy going. Again. He'll rebuild the military. Again. And he'll stand up to China and Russia again. This is the agenda. Now, why is this election so important? Let me remind you of what Chuck Schumer said repeatedly when I was in the Senate and later. He wants a single-party system. The reason he wanted the vote that he couldn't get on the filibuster is he wants to be able to put 4 people in the Supreme Court, and he calls them activists. He doesn't want jurists, he wants activists on the Supreme Court. He wants to add Puerto Rico and D.C. as new states. And here's the holy grail that they want. They want a new federal voting law. Why? Connect that with the tens of millions of people who are coming into the country illegally since he's been in office. You kind of get the picture. They want a single-party system. We're not going to let that happen. I'm here giving up my time and energy to make sure that people understand what's at stake in this election. If we don't win this election, we may not get another chance. So what do we have to do about it? Well, it's very simple in my mind. There are 5 states that will determine the next presidency in the United States. 5. Pennsylvania and Georgia are 2. Now, what do we have to do? In my opinion, we have to come together first. Anybody that's divided, and look, I know we're in a primary season, and I know you're hearing from candidates today, and this is our democracy in practice right here in Pennsylvania at this meeting today. In most countries in the world, you can't do this. Certainly in Russia and China, you can't do it. Well, you can do it in Russia, but we know who will win every election, right? So the reality is, this is democracy at work. We got to be proud of it. We got to take care of it. But we've got to make sure that this time we win. And I can't tell you how important it is. I look at primaries as being sort of like spring football. Now, in Pennsylvania, I know you've had a couple of pretty good teams up here, you know. Hey, I went to Georgia Tech. I have to live in the same state with those guys from the University of Georgia, you know, so I kind of feel your pain. No, but seriously, it's like spring practice. Spring practice, you fight against each other all day, but the minute that's over, you come together and you look across the field at the other team that are the real enemy. That's what we have to do. You know, there are 800,000 people in Georgia, mostly Republicans, out of 5 million, and think about that, over 15%, who had voted in November, the most ever, did not come back out and vote in that runoff. Why? Oh, I didn't trust the election system. Oh, my vote's not going to count. Oh, they pouted and stayed home. And look what we got. We have 2 Democrat senators from Georgia who, in my opinion, do not represent the state. We have a White House who does not represent the majority of people in the United States, in my opinion. So we're not going to let that happen this time. So we have to come together. What I'm begging you to do is to tell people, you got to vote. You can't come to meetings like this and not vote. You got to vote. You'd be shocked. Studies have shown that many people who are calling themselves activists, for one reason or another, will not vote. Why? Because they're upset with something, either in the party or with one of the groups or with the election system or whatever. And I'm telling you, if we do that, we deserve what we get. And in many ways, that's what we're living through right now. Now, I grew up in a little church, and I've gone to meddling now, as they used to call it. But I'm begging you, please, put the issues that we have inside the Republican Party. And yes, we have issues. We should have issues. That's what makes us strong. Look, we can win any debate with any Democrat on any day on issues. They can't win on the issues. Look at the cities. I'm giving you evidence today to use with people in the middle. Trump won in 16 and 20 because he got people in the middle to give him a chance. Oh, I like his outside comments. I don't like everything he's saying, but I'll give him a chance. They saw what he did. They voted for him again in 2020. And after January 6th, he said, oh, well, I don't know if I can vote for him again. Right? You've heard it. Not from this group, but you hear it from your friends, your neighbors, the people you go to church with, the people at school. That's what we are competing with. Look, we're all going to vote for him. I'm preaching to the choir here. But what we have to do is make sure that we get the people around us, the influence area that we have, to make sure they get past this little bump. There are 2 bumps that I see. One is the bump of, oh, I don't like what Trump says. You know what I say to that? Get over it. I do. You should say that. Get over it. I was as close to that man as anybody in Washington. There were only 2 Republican senators that worked for him in 16. I was one of them. The other guy got to be attorney general and left. I stayed in the Senate because he needed somebody to make sure this agenda got done. And I worked with the leadership there, and we were successful doing that. But it was Trump's vision that caused that to happen. Now, what I'm also telling you is this. The idea of electing Republicans is a start. We've got to hold those people accountable. How many times have you sent people to your local capital in Harrisburg or to Washington, and all of a sudden they become tone deaf? They stop listening to you. You know, they say the right things when they're up here where I'm talking to you, and all of a sudden I see head nodding all through the crowd here. Well, whose fault is that? Ours. I put term limit bill in. How far do you think that went? That's how smart I am. I believe in it, though. So here's what I'm about to tell you. This is what's at stake. If you don't hear anything else I say today, hear this. They're not my words. Freedom is never more than 1 generation away from extinction. That's what we're fighting for, guys. It's not passed down in the bloodstream. We have to fight for it, protect it, and pass it on so they can do the same thing. Or one day, in our sunset years, we'll be telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in America when women and men were free. Now, guys, Ronald Reagan said that 50 years ago. How appropriate is that today? Look at what China's doing. China is not a competitor, they're an enemy. They do not want good things for us. They want to control you. What I'm telling you right now is that you cannot have a weak person in the White House in today's environment globally. I know that. Obama cut our military by 25%, folks. 25%. Donald Trump rebuilt it. That's what we're doing today. We're going to stay out of wars as best we can, but the best way to do that is have a strong defense. And what we've got now is we are confusing the world again, just like we did in 2012. I will share this with you. I was as close to Donald Trump as anybody. I watched him work. Nobody in the presidency, in my study of history, I can't find one president that had the reputation or the factual evidence that they worked as hard as Donald Trump did. He would call me at 1:30 in the morning. That's one thing. But then he'd call at 5:30 the same morning. It was like we never finished the conversation. It just kind of kept going overnight. And it was astonishing to me, the energy he would have. He's notorious for playing golf, right? Oh my God, a president went out and took a few hours and played golf. He's pretty good. I have to say that because but he is really good. So when you play golf with him, you go out, and by the time you get through, you go to breakfast, you play golf, you come back and have a bite to eat, and you're meeting. And so by the time you get done, you're exhausted. He's like the Energizer Bunny. He just keeps going and going and going. And if anybody repeats that, I hope this is not taped. I didn't call the president the Energizer Bunny, but he has more energy than any of us. But here's what I want to really tell you. I know his heart. He loves his country. He loves his country. He loves his country. The last day of my 6-year term in the United States Senate, the highest honor of my life, the last day, I was given a Bible. It was a nice leather-bound Bible by a newfound friend, actually, that worked in the Trump campaign in 2016 and worked again in 2020. Lee Greenwood, you may know the name. And he gave me a Bible. In the back of that Bible, in his own hand, he wrote the following words: I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. I'll never forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I'll gladly stand with you today to fight for her still, because there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless USA. God bless you for being here. God bless the United States. And God bless Donald Trump. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you guys being here. Thank you very much.